All right, thanking God just in general this time. Let's call Matthew chapter 2, 4 prophecies, 4 dreams, and 2 kings. In another chapter, I want to look at more or less by the numbers and maybe less so in sequence. In this chapter that, as we have already mentioned, it's going to talk about Jesus's flight to Egypt, understanding he is essentially going to be a refugee, as the news of his birth is going to bring heat from the reigning king Herod over Judea, and it's going to cause his family to have to flee after a prophecy that is going to be sparked by the arrival of the famous wise men to worship Jesus and bring him gifts. However, their arrival is going to bring concern to King Herod and to all Jerusalem, prompting a search to find out where is the Christ to be born, at which point the scribes and the chief priests are going to recite the prophecy in verse 5. They told him, "In Bethlehem, Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." That being the king, of course, in contrast to Herod, the current king of Judea, threatened by the mere birth of the Christ. Going on, though, it's going to talk about the way in which Herod summoned the wise men as though he really wanted to worship too, to find out the timing and piecing things together. He is actually going to try to hatch a plot to kill the Christ, telling the wise men once they have found him to report back so that he can too worship the Christ. However, they are going to be warned in a dream in verse 12 that Herod's intentions are not genuine. So they are going to go back another way, refusing to warn Herod, which is going to give Joseph the opportunity after a dream to flee to Egypt, because he is warned by the angel of the Lord in a dream in verse 13, causing him to get his family together and move out by night, as it is prophesied in verse 15, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Verse 16 going on to say that when Herod found out, he was enraged and issued an order to simply kill all the male children in the area around the time of Jesus' birth, or around the age that he is prophesied to have been at that time. Verse 17 saying, so that the prophecy of Jeremiah might be fulfilled in verse 18, "A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more." Provoking Joseph, after that period of mourning, to have another dream, warning him or telling him that it is now time to bring the child back to Israel now that Herod is dead, as stated in verse 19. However, he's going to be concerned when he hears that Herod's son is still reigning in Judea. And so in another dream, he's going to be warned to withdraw to the district of Galilee, where Nazareth is, understanding that the final prophecy will be fulfilled by them settling in Nazareth, as it's going to say, "The prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene." The thing that caught my attention most in this chapter, however, being the contrast between the 2 kings. The Christ, as we saw early in the chapter, prophesied as one who would be a shepherd of his people. Later on in John's gospel, he is going to at length be described as the good shepherd. He is an interesting contrast to the insecurities of Herod, who, in contrast to a mediocre shepherd, much less a good shepherd, lacked compassion for even the most vulnerable under his care. He also reminded me of an interesting contrast to Jonathan, Saul's son, next in line or rightful heir to the biological throne in Israel after the monarchy was set up. But Jonathan, secure in himself and courageous on the battlefield, when he saw David's gifts from God and the fact that he was actually anointed, was confident enough to simply pass on what might have rightfully been his to David, understanding that his identity was not wrapped up in his title. And so Jonathan, both loyal to the work that he seemed to see God doing through David, and loyal to his father, even though his father Saul was a very flawed man, was willing to lay his life down in battle, as he died in battle with his father Saul, reminding me, at least at this point in my understanding of Matthew chapter 2, of the way in which we will get to see the Christ himself, as we have already mentioned, described as the Good Shepherd, quite possibly described that way because of the way that he likewise was willing to lay down his life for the sheep instead of sacrificing the sheep for his comforts. And for that reason, much of what we see in Jesus' ministry going forward seems to involve him repairing the damage done by those who lacked genuine compassion.